Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Jules for an amazing talk. I'm going to cover a lot of good stuff, many, many things. So I'm very excited to hear it. So I'll go off camera and then I'll come back for Q&A toward the end, but just do your thing, okay?
Thanks,
Thank
Olivia.
you.
Appreciate it.
Glad you're here.
Hello, team. Hello, folks. Hello, friends. My name is Jules. I am a remote nurse, and I am super excited to talk a little bit about what identity means in the remote nursing world, what burnout could look like, and how it might be different from burnout in an inpatient or in a more traditional hospital clinical setting, and a little bit about like my current challenge, which is parenting and navigating the remote world. Um, so my background is I am currently a senior manager of workforce development at Honor, which is a non-medical home care startup. We staff caregivers in homes, and our tasks that folks, execute on in the home are not medical in nature, but tend to be medical adjacent. So oftentimes, having some sort of caregiver in the home when you discharge from a hospital setting is required for their discharge, and then we will be the folks that go into the home to provide that care. So that is where I'm at currently. I also do per diem work. A lot of folks on here have been talking about per diem work. And honestly, I think that working as a remote nurse allowed me to really slow down and think about what I wanted to spend my time doing, which I encourage everyone to really think about. If you have the luxury of being able to slow down, I know that that is also a privilege. Um, but I realized that I've always been interested in forensic nursing, and I always was interested in SANE work. I remember when the SANE came to speak to us in nursing school, and I thought it was a really cool job. And I never really had the time to put into it until I transitioned out of that traditional role. So I do that per diem, and I find it very rewarding. I also not sure how sustainable that work is to do full time. So I feel very lucky that I get to do it per diem, and I still view it as being so fulfilling. Otherwise, I think it would probably contribute to a lot of burnout. So very lucky to be doing that. And then I am the chief executive officer of Chaos Management. That is my house. So I have to navigate all of the chaos in my home, just like many of you on this call probably navigate all the time. And just a little bit of humor there, kind of speaking to all the different hats that we wear as nurses and as humans in the world. Cool. Well, this is me. This is a picture of me and my daughter. This is Noah. She was born in August 4th, last August, not the one that just passed, the one before. So she's about a year and a half old. And she is one of the big reasons that that remote working is really one of the big reasons that she got to be who she is and come about. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So, Olivia, you can go to the next slide for me if you don't mind. And this is just a little bit of my nursing journey. I think it's helpful for people to kind of see where someone may have started and how their employment has progressed and what it looks like now. So, when I first became a nurse, I worked mostly in a primary care setting, and that was in an LGBTQ healthcare setting in New York. In that role, I actually was introduced to remote nursing initially. There were in-person shifts where you were actually the triage nurse on site, and then there were shifts where you would do telephone triage. So was introduced at that point to telephone triage, and I loved it. I loved telephone triage because it felt like I could I got that immediate satisfaction of crossing things off my list and tasks off my list that I really enjoyed. And nurses on here might really enjoy. I think that nursing is very task oriented, and there is a lot of satisfaction you get from getting your list crossed off. So something that I always kind of think about. Then I moved over to staff nursing. So I got back into, or I really got officially into inpatient hospital nursing. I work in Austin, Texas, and that's where I'm at right now. Here is where I got my experience working. I did med surg, PCU, eventually float pool, PACU. I kind of was sent everywhere in the hospital. Um, and it made me really versatile. I really was like, got comfortable with not knowing everything and really needing to like figure out what I need to know to get the job done, which is a skill that many folks on this call probably have and is a very transferable skill to remote work, especially in startup worlds, which I'll talk about a little bit in my current role. Um, while I was a staff nurse, it was it was pretty eye-opening to me, the medical system and how it operated. And I think at this point, it's probably helpful for me to note that growing up, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in a very small Sicilian household, and my actually, Livy, you can go back one time. Yeah, sorry, I'm riffing here. My dad owned a small restaurant. He owned a small business. So I grew up in a small business culture. And so to me, it was very important to, really provide one-to-one care for people, almost as if it was like a small business. And when I worked in the hospital, I realized that that is not the case. You actually do not get a lot of time with people to spend one-on-one with them. And it was a little bit more like a conveyor belt being in the hospital. And I hated that part of it. Along with that, I also really had a hard time with the culture there. When I left my primary care nursing job and went into the hospital system, I really understood the phrase of nurses eat their young. So anytime I felt like I was learning or something was new to me, I felt pretty stressed out about it. The culture was not always kind to newer folks or to folks who are still learning. And that was something that I experienced. So as I kind of did my time, as we say, inpatient, I started to get interested in other opportunities. And I had some friends who had left ICU nursing and did hospice care. So for the folks who were doing hospice care, I was really interested in, kind of the like meta theme of what hospice nursing is in general. It's such a different type of nursing than being in a hospital. Being in someone's home and being invited in someone's home is such a privilege. And I really felt that when I was doing hospice nursing. Um, but quickly, as in most professions, or in most clinical settings, you start to learn like the burnout starts to hit you pretty quickly. And in hospice, it happens pretty fast because of how intense the content is. So I started to experience that a little bit. And as I was experiencing that, March 2020 hit and the world was kind of catapulted into a pandemic, which was the catalyst for many things for many people in many places. And as for me, it was as well. I got a message from a LinkedIn recruiter, pretty unprompted, asking if I was interested in a remote nursing role. And the thing that I'm very grateful for is that it was always instilled in me from when I went to nursing school to have my LinkedIn updated. So I kind of always kept my LinkedIn updated. I kept my online presence updated. Not that I spend a lot of time on there, so don't feel like you have to be on there all the time if you're not, but keeping it updated and keeping it like with industry trends and norms is very important. So I was recruited there from a recruiter, and that is how I really made the big jump out from hospice nursing to a remote world. So in the remote world, I got hired at this company where I'm still at. They're called Honor. And I first started there as a triage escalation lead. And I know there were some questions in other sessions around like licensure and things like that, if you need it for different roles. In this role, I did not need my state licensure specifically to practice nursing, but they required the nursing license to have the role and to be able to use my skills in that role. So it's not like I had to sign documents that said Jules Stracquadanio RN, but I was using my assessment skills and my triage skills to fulfill this role that they had, which was the escalation lead. Essentially, in that role, I would navigate any crises over the phone that a caregiver or a client was experiencing in their visit. So that ranged from pretty benign things like I can't find the client's Mediset to pretty intense things like a dementia patient that wandered and was lost on like a 4-acre farm, right? So that was the spectrum of things that you're navigating. Um, so that's kind of where I started, and then from there, that role has really evolved. I learned more skills. I slowed down to really understand what I was interested in. That's when I got to spend time and get my degree or my certification to do SANE nursing. It really afforded me the ability to do that. Um, So that's kind of like where we're at now. Now I am the workforce development senior manager. So I do a lot of quality initiatives to kind of propel quality and to make sure that our workforce is as skilled as they need to be, or get them skilled to meet the need that the market has. It's pretty creative. I get to you know, design curriculums. I get to implement new strategies. I get to do test pilots. And it's a very startup world, meaning that you're scrappy. You are kind of like doing 5 different jobs all in one, which I really like as a float pool nurse. I feel like that's something that's just kind of instilled in us. Um, and that's what I'm doing now. So on the weekends, I get to do 2 or 3 shifts a month generally as a SANE nurse. I'm actually on call tonight. And that's when I get to see patients in person. And I really get to spend my time with patients in person the way that I wanted to, right? I get to spend like 4 or 5 hours of extended time together, really focus on what their needs are. And I am able to be with them more holistically than I was able to in hospital nursing. So it feels like my cup is being filled in a lot of ways. My remote nursing job affords me a lot of flexibility, which we'll talk about how important that is as a parent. And then my per diem job really fills up my cup for the work that I'm doing. Um, so one of the things that we're going to talk about today is identity. And it's a big topic here because I think when I became a nurse, I was so proud to be a nurse, like many of us, and we all should be very, very proud to be a nurse. It was really hard. Nursing school was hard. Passing the NCLEX was hard. You know, it's a badge of honor. You kind of wear a badge of honor when you become an RN. So I felt very strongly connected to that identity. When I left, more traditional nursing. Even when I left the hospital going into hospice, it felt like a little bit of an identity crisis. But when I left hospice to go into honor, where I'm at now, that was a major identity crisis. So the question here was really, am I still a nurse if I'm not in a traditional clinical setting? And that question has really, the answer to that question has really changed throughout my time. I think in the beginning, I felt I faced a lot of kind of blows from my family, from other nurses, from friends, saying that like I wasn't a nurse anymore. I kind of had sold my soul. I think Olivia said before that I went to the dark side. Y'all might hear that. Um, so I really had to like understand what it meant to me to be a nurse and what it was to not be in a clinical setting. And what I landed on really was like, what is the impact that I'm making? And am I still able to be an advocate? I think as nurses, we are fierce advocates for the communities that we represent, depending on where we work. But impact wise, I wanted to still make sure no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a nurse role or not, right? I want to make sure that my actions are making things better, that we are trying to make a system or a situation better than when we found it. And for me, I found that answer is true, right? The work that I do, I still am able to connect it to the impact that I make. I get to be a fierce advocate for aging seniors who want to stay in their home, right? And I got to see that really firsthand in hospice. People who want to die in their homes. And folks who are in the hospital systems, especially like in ICUs, we know how devastating it is to our own mental health to watch the prolonging of life that happens in the US. Prolonging of life is like it's honestly like a metric, honestly, that we're measuring to measure how successful we are in our healthcare, right? But what we see families that come in and day out and are struggling to be able to come visit between their work responsibilities or parenting responsibilities. We see the financial impact that prolonging life creates. We see all of the decline that people experience when they're really trying to grasp at straws to prolong life in any way they can. So for me, one of my like major things was if somebody wants to be stay at their home, I want to be able to do everything in my power to help them be able to stay in their home. And I get to do that at my job right now. So what I would encourage people on the call to think about is what is your impact? What is the thing that feels really important to you? And also, it doesn't have to be one thing, right? Like dynamic people. We have many layers to us, right? That is one impact that's important to me, but also responding to survivors of sexual assault is also a big, important impact for me. So being able to do both of those things, I've been able to set up my life so that I can do both those things. So I encourage folks to like, you don't have to think too small. Don't think too big where it's not something that you can actually execute on, but you know, think of what your optimal situation would be, and there might be a way to do it. There might be a way for you to be able to really do that. Um, and lastly, just kind of speaking on the advocacy, if you have a specific community that's important for you to advocate for, maybe you're looking for that in the remote work that you're interested in, right? Maybe you're interested in the specific communities that a particular company is serving. That's one way to go about what kind of work might be right for you. Okay, I said a lot. I think we can probably go to the next slide. Okay, cool. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about parenting and what it's like to be a parent and do remote work. Firstly, I need to speak to this. I was not able to have a child a traditional way, right? Me and my partner, we had to go down many different routes to try to have our baby. Eventually, it was IVF that we had to use. So, very grateful for IVF. But if anyone on this call has gone through IVF, first of all, shout out to you because that is rough. But if anyone else has been on this call and experienced this, you know the time commitment, the financial commitment, and the emotional toll that that can really take on you. And I am very grateful to say that because I transitioned to this remote work, I had the flexibility to be able to navigate that. So I was able to navigate both my partner going through IVF medications and also myself going through IVF medications. And that is not something, I mean, people do it, right? I think people who work in traditional settings do this. It's very difficult. So it felt like I had a little bit of an extra privilege, in a remote world navigating that. But through all that, we did have our daughter Noah. She's hysterical. And I work in a setting at Honor where it's pretty common for people to have their kids kind of running in the background on the screen. Or if there's a new baby, everyone on a meeting wants to see the new baby. So I got to experience that. I got to experience people being excited about seeing Noah on camera. Not having to hide the fact that my kid was at home, especially in the beginning. um, I will say sick days are still tough, right? So we talked in another session about how work from home or remote work is not easy work. This is still hard work, and it takes a lot more discipline and time management for us to be able to really be successful in this work. So really important to kind of say sick days are still tough. It's not, oh my gosh, I have to leave. Let me call my manager tough. But it is, oh man, I'm going to have to be flexible today because I have to take my kid to the doctor. I know tonight I'm probably making up some of that time because I had to lose it during the day. So that's the kind of tough that I've been navigating. Like I said, requires more discipline. Something that I would talk about here is, I don't know if folks have mentioned this at all, but there's something called the Pomodoro timer. And the Pomodoro timer is a kind of like a time management tool that I've used. I was I was lucky enough to go through a manager training course through my company. And it was something that I learned through them. And basically, it's like a little timer. And the timer sets you for 25 minutes of work and then a short break. So 25 minutes, 5 minute break, 25 minutes work, 5 minute break. You do that 4 times. And at the fourth 25-minute stretch, then you take a longer break, which is a 15-minute break. So I like very concrete ways and useful things to take away. So I wanted to mention the Pomodoro timer here. So if anyone is working in remote work and you haven't heard of it, and you are struggling with your discipline or struggling with your time management, consider the use of the Pomodoro timer. I'm not really sure why it's called Pomodoro. I'm sure that there's some ideology that I'm not aware of, but it's like a little tomato. It's very cute. You can find it online. Super useful. Other things that remote work has really afforded me, especially being a parent, I have been so present for all the big milestones that my daughter has gone through, and I get to be more present for family time. Um, Things that we forget, or maybe I have forgotten because I'm working in this world now for like 5 years. But when we were working, or when I was working in the traditional setting, um, all of our time commuting, all of our time getting ready in the morning just to get out of the house, you really realize how much extra time you have in your day, even though for some folks who've been doing this for a while, you might not feel it anymore because you're used to it, but you do get precious, precious time back. And if you can utilize that time properly, then mundane chores don't take over, right? They don't take over in the evening time when my family wants to spend time or have dinner together. I can throw in a load of wash in the morning instead of commuting to work. And then that's something that I don't have to do in the evening, which is a really incredible takeaway and privilege of being able to remote work. Also, I get to spend more time prioritizing like health and my health, my family's health. Oftentimes, this looks like healthy cooking, which is one of the number one things I think that fell to the wayside when I was bedside nursing. I barely ate and I mostly ran on coffee, which is a really great way to get an ulcer. I know I have my own experience from that. And I'm sure people on this call have also experienced, health deficits related to, not having time to prioritize our health. So really being able to prioritize that has been a game changer for me. Okay, I think we have another slide. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about burnout. Um, Burnout is not reserved for bedside nursing, though very common in bedside nursing. And I think that there was a comment in another session about someone who was experiencing physical manifestations or repercussions of the burnout that we experience as nurses. And I talked a little bit about before, burnout is literally just overworking, right? Picking up shifts, picking up extra shifts to try to make extra money. It is feeling deeply emotionally attached to the work that we're doing, and that taking a toll on us over and over again. It is operating within a health system that results in a lot of moral injury because what your manager or what your department needs you to do is not actually the right thing for the patient. That takes a toll on us. So burnout in a remote setting looks a little bit different and is usually because of a little bit of different things. So I think as nurses, we are very, very focused on results, really, really kind of like focusing on what was the impact of the intervention that I provided. And if all the orders have not been taken care of before the next shift comes, then I have not really completed my job for the day. Everyone on this call knows, right? We all know when we've given report to people and we get a little bit of shade when something wasn't done during the day because it was really busy. I've been the person who hasn't gotten it done, and I've been annoyed by the people who haven't gotten it done. So we know that feeling. Um, when you move to remote work, depending on the kind of role that you have, if you have a triage role, it might be a little bit more of a one-to-one match of feeling like, yes, I have checked off all my boxes, I have done all my tasks for the day. But in other professions, in the role that I'm in right now, work is never really done, right? There's never really a finish to the day. There are always things that we are optimizing, we're iterating on, we're changing, we're testing. Not everything is going to happen in one day. And in my experience, that was really hard for me. I felt like I wanted to try to get everything done on one day so that the next day it was just a fresh slate, a fresh piece of paper, nothing was on it. I could just totally start fresh. And that is not the way that we can work in remote nursing. We have to have project plans where you have different goals days where you have to have things done by, and you're working towards new goals and new projects. So it's never really done. So it ends up looking a little bit different, the reason why we get there. But burnout is definitely present nonetheless. Symptoms of burnout, which I'm sure that people have experienced. The top few here: emotional exhaustion, physical symptoms, behavioral changes. Those are some of the big ones, right? Those are like things that we hear about all the time. We know that those things are present. The bottom two, I think, sometimes are a little sneakier. And these are the two that hit me the most, which is why I wanted to include them. So for me, cynicism is a really early sign that I'm feeling burnt out. I'm feeling like detached from everyone or feeling like, it's a great idea, but it'll never work, that kind of thinking. That's when I kind of know that I'm burnt out. Um, Reduced personal accomplishment, feeling like nothing I do matters or is impacting anything. I also sometimes call this like feeling disillusioned. Um, those are really early indicators for me that I'm starting to feel some burnout. And that's a bummer because if you're feeling those two things, it's impacting the people you work with. It's impacting the like the product or the result that your whole role is working towards. It's impacting the team, right? It's impacting like larger initiatives. So it's not good for myself and it's also not good for my colleagues. So it's really important that I clock some of these things. And I think the way that you can clock them is staying in community with other people that could be experiencing them too, right? So having connection with other maybe clinical staff in a role or even non-clinical staff and feeling like you are safe to be able to bounce off what's going on with you is really important. And isolation is a big thing in remote work. You can feel like you are completely isolated when you're working in a hospital system or in an inpatient setting, the health team is surrounded by you literally the entire time. And that transition was very strange. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So some of the things to kind of consider when you might be experiencing symptoms of burnout. Someone talked about this earlier. How did I get here? That's a good question to ask. Like, what is it that is contributing to the burnout? Usually for me, it is trying to take on too much without asking for help. I think that nurses in general have a lot of pride and we don't always ask for help. Sometimes asking for help makes you seem weak in our profession. And instead, I think that it could look like you're asking for collaboration, which is like the healthy version of asking for help, right? The healthy version of what it means to need help. Um, and how to combat. So how to combat the burnout that you might be feeling. So really thinking critically about how I got here and what things I need to change to avoid it is great. But sometimes if you've gone too far, you've gone too far and you can't totally change it with just your mindset. So that's kind of when you really need to think about, do I need to speak to somebody about getting something off my plate? Do I need to prioritize different ways of setting boundaries or self-care for myself? Sometimes it means that you have to take some time away, right? Maybe it means you have to take a PTO day. Maybe it means you have to take a long weekend, like you have to take a Friday, Monday. And I know that saying these things to people who work in healthcare, work in, traditional clinical settings, sounds crazy, right? It sounds like, no, you do your 312s, you push through, you power through, and that's it. And I think what we're learning as a culture and as a community is that that's not working anymore. So being able to ask for help, being able to take time away, prioritizing self-care are all ways that we really can contribute to the mission of a company that someone has, contribute to our clients or patients' health, contribute to our own health, and contribute to the longevity of the profession, right? Because what we also know is that nurses are leaving the bedside in like masses. Um, that happened kind of, pandemic started that, really has kind of um, progressed since then, but something is not working, right? So the idea of power through and no matter what, I'm just going to be okay because I'm a nurse and that's it, and I'm going to wear my hard, tough day as a badge of honor, it's not totally working anymore. And it doesn't mean that nurses don't deserve respect because we do deserve respect. And the ability to push through and the fight or flight that we experience as nurses is, we should be thanking each other for the service that we do. Similar to how we thank um, military folks, like we should be thanking each other for the sacrifices that we have made for our bodies and for the time we spend with our families. And maybe, just maybe, it could be time for you to cash in on what you've put in to this profession and transition your work from traditional setting to a remote setting. That's my plug on that. Okay, I think we have a few more slides. Okay, transition tips. So, for me, when I transitioned from the traditional healthcare setting to remote work, there were a few things that came up for me. One of the things that I didn't talk about before that I meant to is how different it feels to be operating within a virtual setting and how you experience people experiencing you differently. When you're in a hospital setting, you've got your badge, you've got your scrubs, you've got respect. Like pretty quickly, no matter where you are, you're getting that respect in a hospital setting. When you're in a virtual setting, it's kind of all level playing field, right? It's a little bit different. No one has any like indications that they are, other than titles, there could be some seniority and titles, but no one is giving the nurses, as much respect immediately than you would in a hospital setting. So it changes the way that people experience you. And for me, it really taught me that I needed to change the way that I interacted with people. I, for me, again, I'll say like, it's really important for me to like create a working environment that feels good for other people. And you'd be surprised at how far that can get you. And I think I said in another session, I don't have every single certification or degree that other folks might have. But what I do have is the ability to really listen and to collaborate and to be present with someone. And that gets you pretty far in this work. It doesn't mean it gets you all the way. There are things that you have to like be honest with yourself about, right? Staying educated and making sure that you are sharpening skills that maybe we don't have, which I think comes up in another slide. But really learning how to operate in that virtual environment, it really is different from working in an in-person traditional setting. Other things that are important, right? You have to figure out a new morning routine or a new routine before work. If your routine was, commuting and listening to music and, being able to move your body a little bit in the morning, it's very easy for people to fall into the trap of roll out of bed and jump on your computer. That doesn't feel great. Even if it feels like, wow, I got to have some extra sleep today, having some sort of warm up and having some time for yourself that you might have gotten in your commute, you should probably replace it in some way in the morning before you work, even when you're working from home. So it's a good idea to think about what your new morning routine is going to look like, what you want it to consist of, what you want to engage in to feel like you're ready for the day, similarly to how you might do it going into a traditional setting. Other things, practice what you don't like. So if there's something that you're like, oh, I hate that, is it because you're not good at it? Because we have to be honest with ourselves around that. For me, I know for me, like Excel document formulas, I'm like, oh, I hate them. I have to practice them. I have to keep utilizing them because it's a deficit that I know that I have to continually work on, so that I don't feel like it's so foreign to me. So if you don't like something, it probably means that you might not be the best at it, and it's an opportunity for you to like get better. Get outside. You could be stuck in an office all day or in your work from home office or in your home. And sometimes I will truthfully, if I'm being real, like I'll say to my wife, I don't think I've felt the sun on me today. Like I have not even stepped outside yet. So set your Pomodoro timer, take those breaks, get outside, get the sunshine. It's really important for our bodies and for our minds to do that. Stay educated. We talked like about that before. Staying educated again is not just from certifications or from pieces of paper, from courses that you take. If there's like a free YouTube course that you want to do because there's a skill you need to learn, I'm all about that. That's what I do. But other ways that I like to do it is really just connecting with people. So if there's someone at my company that I value and respect and they have a skill that I want, I talk to them. I check in with them. I ask them how they do it. I ask them for time, right? If I can put time on their calendar to learn a little bit about how they do that. So staying educated does not need to be the classic formal way that you might have seen it in a traditional setting. Don't get too insular. That's something that I've learned, right? Talk to people outside of your team. Talk to people who disagree with you. Talk to people who have no idea what you do. That is an incredible way to like learn how to work cross-functionally with people. Understanding what other folks are doing in a company really gives you perspective on like what the goals are and how we get there and how it's important for people to have different lenses and different perspectives at a company. We can't all think the same way. If we're all thinking the same way, it's like super boring and we're never going to like change things. So talking to people outside of your team is a really great thing. Finally, find your people. There are oftentimes at remote work companies, there's something called employee resource groups. And those are usually, I don't know, in fact, I didn't watch the entire one for Slack, but Jeffrey might have talked about it. There are sometimes fun channels that companies will have, like a dogs channel where people just post pictures of their dogs, or there's a babies channel where people post pictures of their babies. There are also, like in my company, we have something called Act with Pride. So for LGBTQ identified folks, they can join that channel and talk to people that are alike and talk to them about challenges they're having and things that they can do to stay engaged with their community. Um, so it's a really nice way to find out like who are your people at your company because they're not just going to come to you. You're not going to pass people in the hallway like you do in a traditional hospital setting. It's not going to be like that. So you kind of have to put a little bit more energy into finding who your people are. Okay, I think we have maybe just one more slide. Cool. And I just want to kind of like normalize some of this, right? So making the jump from a traditional nursing model to a remote nursing work or world, it can feel really scary. I was scared when I did it. I think one thing that we can remember is that we do have nursing skills that we can rely on, and it should make you feel a little bit better about making the plunge. But the truth is that this work still scares me. Um, Excel formulas, like I talked about before, they scare me. I'm still intimidated by that work. It means I have to keep doing it so that I get more comfortable, but it does intimidate me. Data pivot charts intimidate me, right? And some of these words you might not have ever heard, and that's okay. You don't have to know these things to get into the world, but you will probably have to, hone and sharpen your skills in these different categories and be open to learning these things. Gantt charts scare me, right? Project management charts scare me. The video chat mute button scares me. Okay, if that button is not pushed at the wrong time, it could be really bad for a lot of people. So, really learning the etiquette of being on virtual meetings and virtual platforms like Zoom or Google Meets, really getting that etiquette in Slack, like what they were talking about in the session before. Those things are all really important and they're always going to be a little bit scary. Eventually, things become more comfortable, right? Like I feel very comfortable in Slack. I feel pretty comfortable in different programs that I'm using for my job, but I was new to all of them. And I think as nurses, sometimes, especially if you've been in the field for a while, it feels a little scary to be new at something. And I encourage people to think that maybe it doesn't have to be scary. Maybe it feels a little bit exciting. I think the final thing that I'll say before we get to Q&A is like, I do not want to be the smartest person in a room or in a meeting. If I'm in a meeting and I'm the smartest person in that room, that's not exciting for me, right? That's not exciting for me to like think about what else I could be doing or what else I could be learning or new things that we could be trying. You want to surround yourself with people who know more so that you can learn. And there is a bit of an ego death that happens when you transition from that clinical model to a more remote work world. And it is scary and a little bit intimidating, but it has afforded me so many privileges, so many things that I would have never been able to get in that traditional model. And like I said, I mean, look at me. I am a pretty alternative looking person. I am pretty heavily tattooed. I have my head is shaved, right? Like there is room for everybody in the remote world, no matter what you look like, no matter how old you are, right? If you have an open mind and you are down to learn things and you are honest about the deficits that you do have, so that you can work on them, there is always going to be a space for people. So with that, I think that I can probably wrap up and we can move to Q&A. I will say, I gotta stop talking, but I will say, like, when people start at my company and I meet with them, I say, hey, what questions do you have that you don't want to ask anybody else? Because I'm just down to get real. So if anybody has questions that you are afraid to ask other folks, ask me. I am never going to make somebody feel shame or judged or anything like that. Like, I'm down to talk about things that might feel kind of strange. And also, like, if you have the question, then somebody else has the question. Okay.
Amazing. Okay. I'm trying to get out of the screen shared thing. Um, okay. Sorry. Okay. That was packed full of very valuable things. So many good things. I have so many notes that I was taking. Thank you so much. I think that that is a very important counterbalance, to a lot of the narrative of what's going on. So you brought an amazing perspective, and thank you for contributing today and bringing all that to our participants. So Q&A is open if anybody has any questions. Um, we have a thanks, Jules, exclamation point, great info. And then let me check the other one. I mean, I wrote down a bunch of things. Yes. What is the impact I am making? That is huge. And I think a bit of a theme today is like know your why behind stuff, and that you can ask yourself that question whether you're deciding to leave your current job about what you're doing, or where you want to go to make an impact. I think that's a critical step, is asking yourself that question. Um, Healthy cooking, yes, much better at home. 100%. Um, I am
Speaking
very
of
guilty.
real quick interjection, just for fun.
Mhm.
Speaking of healthy cooking and timers, check the lobby chat for my most recent comic strip.
Awesome.
It ties both themes together. It's for special for you, Jules. You can check it later, but when we're done with this session, check the lobby chat.
That pesky mute button.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm telling you, the Pomodoro timer has really changed my life.
You know what's crazy is I didn't know that that was such a thing, but about 6 months ago, I started telling Olivia, I'm like, I'm working so much better if I set a 20-minute timer and then get up and just do something else. It could be for a minute, 30 seconds, 10 minutes. It could be checking the mail. It could be walking around the house, be doing some push-ups. It could be, blasting some tunes. And then I do
Yes.
20 minutes, but I'm always back for 20 minutes. And I'm so focused. It's like the best thing ever. I have my best
Yes.
days when I do that.
It's so true. It's so true. Because I think that's what happens is we get kind of caught up in the productivity world of like produce. If we were working in an office, you wouldn't be working 20 hours straight without a break, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Naturally, you'd be interrupted, you'd be getting up. So we shouldn't be expected to do that at home either. It's not a good idea.
Mhm.
I know, and it's so backwards sounding because if I hadn't been working remote for the last, several years, I'd be like, but at home you're more likely to get up and do stuff, right? But it's so true. You get locked in. You feel like you're constantly having to prove yourself because everyone's like, "Oh, she's work from home." So you're like,
Totally.
you have to like show more work product to make it
Mhm.
feel like you're actually working, right?
Right, right. That's really true. I got a shout out from Shannon, was a former SANE. Thank you. Respect to you too.
Do you see
Hmm.
the next question in there,
Yeah,
Jules?
I see this. I'll read it. Yeah. What advice do you have for niching down your why in the context of looking for a remote job? I'm passionate about just about anything in nursing because my why is that I want to help people, which is really broad. Oh, what a great question, comment. I watched this growing up, I like wanted to do everything. I wanted to try a million things. And something that I didn't mention here was that like as a nurse, I have done so many strange little jobs. I was a gynecological teaching model for a little while, right? So I would like guide medical students through trauma-informed pelvic exams. What? Like you're not gonna find that job on LinkedIn, right? I worked for a former colleague, an MD, who had an IV vitamin company, and I put IVs in for Ducati motorcycles, like motorcycle riders, drivers. I don't know, it was crazy. But like, I think it's okay to be broad and be like, yeah, I'm interested in everything. I want to help like all different kinds of people. I think that's cool. But what this person is saying is like, do we have to kind of like niche it down to what is your why? And I think the answer is probably yes and no. When it comes to remote work, I think it has more to do with what your day-to-day work is going to be than it is like what a company's mission is. Unless you feel so like overtly against a company's mission, like don't be down for that. But there are a lot of different things that people are focusing on right now. I feel like I see a lot of mental health related stuff on LinkedIn, and of course lots of chronic disease management kind of stuff. But I would encourage you to think about like, what do you want to be doing, like literally doing? Do you want to be writing curriculums and teaching people things? Do you want to be like analyzing data around like how well a certain intervention is working? Like, does that interest you? Really zooming into what is the actual work that you're doing, less of like what is the mission that a company is trying to solve or work towards. I don't know if that helps.
Jules, I was just gonna add something really quick there too. Just I think it goes kind of dovetails nicely with those things you just laid out, which is what style of company do you want to work for? Because there's like the gunslinging Silicon Valley startup that is like high risk, high reward. It might be 6 days a work week of 6 days, 1 day off, and work until the engineers might be working until 2 in the morning and expect to be able to call you to get clarification on something. Or so like, do you want that, which can be high reward but high risk as well and high turnover too? So like,
Mm-hmm.
that can you're gonna roll with the punches and something like that, or do you want a stable, established, large corporate entity, big pharma kind of situation where you're likely to be like your job security is much more stable, and it's a 9 to 5, and it's going to be. I coach uh, physicians, young physicians, like residents and stuff. Part of my work at Stanford was coaching residents or medical students to determine what they wanted to do with their futures, and I represented the industry angle on that. And one of the things I'd mention is that you can get into industry if you get into a small startup first. You're likely to get title inflation and lower pay, but maybe more equity to make up for it. By title inflation, I mean you're more likely to have them sweep you up as like the medical director or like clinical director or like maybe even more than that, like a VP of like clinic operations or some or research or something. Versus if you joined Genentech tomorrow, they're going to be like you're going to be on like the lowest entry level position ever, but you might get paid. You actually might get paid more. So you have to kind of like, and it's more of a stable paycheck because they're not offsetting it with equity. They're giving you things like benefits and stuff like that. So long-winded answer, or not even answer, no one even asked me to talk about this, but I'm just throwing it out there. But you have to think about what setting is best for you, because Silicon Valley is all about like changing jobs every 2 years. Like I got, you're kind of like flipping your job to climb the ladder and get your title as high as you can, versus like a long, stable, slower trajectory at like a bigger established company is probably going to get you a little more pay, but you're more of going to feel like a cog in the wheel. You're probably going to have your fingerprints less on some of the critical decisions. and your title is going to be lower. That's my read on it. Maybe more so from a clinic, from a medical student resident kind of perspective, but I think some of that could still apply.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's really a good call out. There's so many different, and it's hard to know too for folks like when they're searching through posts, it's hard to know what those companies even are, right? Even when you Google them. So it's important to like talk to people that maybe might know a little bit more about those companies so that you can get insight on that.
Great point. Actually, that's real. I love how they say company, how they make the company say what their size of their company is. If it's like 10 or less, like, I mean, look at Shadowers. I think we have like, what, we have like six actual employees, and actually everyone's volunteer. Just, everyone's a volunteer. Like, we don't, nobody gets paid. So, but we're like less than 10 people actually like in our kind of like corporate unit. So, um, it's very, uh, volatile because of that. So if you look at a company like I think for me personally, if I were to join my sweet spot is finding a company that's about 100, 150 to 200 people, something along that range. I like that because I get to know, I know everybody. I'm probably at a role that I have a lot of like strategic like leanings. I'm not like employee number 5,000. You know what I mean? Like if I go work for Google today, like 99% of the people at Google aren't going to even know who I am. So you're going to be on
Totally.
some little pod, some little team shoved in some little, building somewhere. And so it's just, and that's fine because some people want that level of just kind of comfort knowing like nothing's going to change tomorrow. I'm going to walk in and it's still going to be the same thing. And that's great. And other people
Yeah,
want the young gun kind of like, Russian roulette of smaller, but this like a 10-person company is going to be highly volatile.
totally. Yeah, and that's where I'm at. I'm at like 150, 200 people company. It feels great. I get to still know everyone. I see we have one more question. Rochelle, what are some things you look for in potential companies to rule out whether or not you want to apply for their positions? Well, I think that what Jeff said is right, right? Like, so like maybe looking at the size of a company could give you an idea of what you want and kind of what he spoke to there and what vibe you're interested in. Um, for me, I think this is also like very, very personal. So for me, where I'm at right now with my kiddo, I really don't want to travel. So if there's any travel involved with the role, like that's not for me. But some people are really like invigorated by the idea of maybe traveling a little bit. So it really depends on personally like what you're looking for. If you're asking like what are red flags, hard to know. I mean, somebody might have a better answer than me, but I feel like I've only experienced red flags after speaking to like a recruiter or being in an interview. Um, I would say that like if you're asked, oftentimes it's pretty industry standard to be doing a few different interviews and then eventually getting to some sort of simulation. A simulation prep should not be taking you like days and days and days. That is a red flag for me. I am not spending days and days on a presentation for a simulation for a job, unless it's like a dream job where, highly competitive, whatever. But if you're first getting into remote nurse work, it's not something you should be like spending all of your time doing for a simulation. Also, like any sort of um like no-show situations where someone doesn't show up to a meeting, those are red flags for me. Folks not being able to like answer my questions, even if they don't have the answer like totally, being able to speak to like where they would go to get that answer or having like a thoughtful response is if they're not able to do that, that's also a pretty much a red flag for me. So really, but it really depends on like personal, what you're personally looking for.
Okay, should
Excellent.
we jump to the next
Thank
session? Libby,
you.
did you want to say something?
No, that was brilliant. Great. Thank you so much. It was
Thanks,
inspiring,
y'all.
well put together, and honored that you're here with us. So,